Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List. This is episode 3 of my new series, Psychoanalyze This, with Jetta Weinstein, the one, the only Iron Cupcake, covering The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers from 2019. I chose this one specifically, I think I chose this, Jetta, because you love it so much. It's one of those very big Jetta movies, I felt like, and I didn't want to cover it with anyone else.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love this movie immensely. I don't even remember how many times I've seen it at this point, but it's been probably close to 10 at this point. So yeah, like it's a movie that I just find more and more out of every single time I watch it. I feel like there's just always something new. There's always some new angle to approach it with. And I'm not an expert in terms of psychoanalysis, but I do think that there's a lot that I get out of it that I feel like I can approach from the perspective of being a woman watching these, crazy, ridiculous men do their crazy, ridiculous things. I think there is something especially fascinating about being a woman watching a movie made by a man, really by two men, because it was made by both of the Eggers brothers, starring essentially just two men with only a mermaid as the one woman character. But there is something about trying to understand why they do what they do and feeling like I put my own awareness and my perspective on how their fears, their insecurities, their desires all motivate them and drive them to, go off the deep end. And I wanted to start with two things. First, a quote that I really, really love from Survivor 50, because I've been watching Survivor 50 this season. Now, I'm a Survivor super fan,
I had no
right?
idea that that's what you were going to say. I thought you were going to give us some profound. Okay, go ahead.
No. Well, I think it is profound in its own very strange, curious way. So okay. Survivor 50 is an all-stars season.
Oh
now,
goodness.
These contestants are stranded there, as usual, in Fiji and trying to figure out how best to survive. And there's a character there named Coach. This is Coach's 4th time playing. Of course, he's hoping to win, as they all are. And Coach loves two things. He loves to say that he plays with honor and integrity, even though he does not. He backstabs people and then says, "Oh, I was honorable." So he's hilariously delusional. But also, he loves to quote people. He loves to quote inspirational figures. Like he'll quote Martin Luther King or Gandhi. He will misquote them, or it's something they never even said to begin with. So I don't know where he gets these quotes from. But he said something last week that I think is so perfect in its absurdity that it is so applicable to the Lighthouse. He said, "Yesterday's adversary is tomorrow's enemy. Today's enemy is tomorrow's adversary." Now, I don't know if this 53-year-old man realizes that adversary and enemy mean the same thing, but isn't that circular logic that, the absurdity, the ridiculousness, perfect for the Lighthouse? These men are stuck in a loop. It's the same thing. They're not friends. They're not enemies.
Before we get into, I know this is a little bit premature, but you're sparking the conversation about identity, because I read a lot of interviews, about Eggers, to the point where I don't even know if I have my own opinion anymore because I know his so much. But he and Max, his brother, had based this on a true story of two people who went mad in a lighthouse, and both of their names were Thomas. And so he named these guys both Thomas in the roundabout way. Do you feel at all, in any way, that they are the same person? Like you're saying, this guy has no idea about enemy and adversary. That made me think, just right off the bat, do you think it's possible that, like, Willem Dafoe's Thomas is his shadow self and this is all just him?
Oh, yeah. I think it's totally possible. I think a lot about doubling. I think about mirror images when I watch The Lighthouse.
Duality.
I think about yeah, absolutely. I think about the fact that when we first meet these characters getting off the boat, they are passed by two other men leaving the island. Who are these men? How did they manage to escape the island unscathed, seemingly? We don't even know if they exist. The great thing about The Lighthouse is we don't know if any of this is real. It could all be totally fantasy. And whether or not you believe one thing is real or fantasy, maybe Winslow died before he ever even left Canada. How do we really know? And it's all just conjecture. But it's the idea of all these things coming together and trying to figure out what they mean, or do they even mean anything, that I just think is fascinating and funny. Like, the great thing about The Lighthouse to me is that it's not, even though it looks like a very serious art house drama. It is so funny. There's so
Robert
much comedy in
Pattinson
it.
literally told, I think it was GQ, I read, that he told them he thought it was 100% a comedy, and
Hmm.
he himself campaigned for it to be nominated for Golden Globe Best Motion Picture Comedy.
Or musical, they do also sing.
So he is on. I mean, I knew that you would probably be on Pattinson's wavelength as far as like him, the actor, approaching this, because he sees things. I think he watched the movie very similarly to you, which is like focusing on the absurdity, the crazy randomness of it. Like, but you're like all on board for it. You don't get. I don't think that you get like particularly wrapped up in what really happened. Like, it doesn't bother you, the ambiguities of this film, does it? Do they?
Well, I think there are a couple ways to approach this. One is that it's like a workplace comedy, really, because it's about, being angry about your supervisor giving you a bad evaluation. I mean, like, that's like ultimately what it boils down to. Think about the fact that I'm going to, I think, differentiate between them by saying Winslow and Wake, because that's the easiest.
Okay, that's
right?
fine.
So Winslow,
who is Pattinson, Wake is Defoe.
Winslow is so frustrated because he's doing all this work. He thinks that he's making all these inroads by impressing Wake with, what he would consider woman's work because he's cleaning. He's so angry that he has to clean. Like, think about that. He can't believe he has to clean. I mean, this is something he would never have to do, I guess, in his other work or just generally.
Lumber job.
Yeah,
supposedly.
like he has to do cleaning. He has to keep house. He has to cook, whatever rations they have, I guess. And at the end of it, he can't believe that he got bad write-ups. So there is something incredibly comical about that no matter how serious it seems, it does boil down to the ridiculousness of what's written on a logbook that's kept under lock and key. Why does Wake even keep it under lock and key? What does it matter?
Well, it's also, if you go back, you could also say it's also about somebody who doesn't like the person's cooking. I mean, if you want to get like really into the pettiness of the film, there's the logbook, but then there's also on the flip side, say you love my lobster, that whole ridiculous thing. But it is to me, it feels more like a marriage than but you could say it is an employee boss situation too. Willem Dafoe said it's, dominance versus submission. So all the power dynamic stuff that's in here that everybody's and their mom has written about is you could take it into those realms.
Definitely. And I think there's something really interesting to me about the fact that it's a story about two men struggling in the absence of women. Like, think about the roles that women would be expected to play in a story set at this time, assuming that it's also around 1900, like the original story that it's inspired by. You would expect a woman would be cooking and cleaning, that a woman would be available for sex or companionship. These men are struggling without them. And what do they do all the time? They get angry, they fart, they curse, they jerk off a lot. Like they do all these things because there is nobody, the woman who would be expected to be the stabilizing force in this situation is not present. And the most that either of them could fantasize about is a mermaid, which is also very interesting because why does Winslow fantasize about a mermaid? Well, it could be that she's exciting and different because she's not a human, as we would think of one, like wholly human, but she looks enough like a woman, and she also can't communicate with spoken language. She's not going to nag him. She's not going to bother him. She also can't consent, but she's basically just a sex object.
Okay, well, two things about that. One, I think the thing that sparked it is that he found the figurine, right, in the bed.
Yes.
And I'm not sure where his brain would have traversed to had he not had some sort of like physical object. So that's the first thing. The second thing too is that the mermaid is actually a very frightening figure. So I think the way that they view women, there's two things. One is that the mermaid like shrieks and she's very scary and she's clearly like rejecting him, in my opinion, until he has his own fantasy. And then two, Willem Dafoe's character Wake references his wife and says that the lighthouse is a far better wife than any other woman. Like she is the light is the pinnacle of femininity almost. So how do you reconcile with those two things?
Well, I think it's really interesting that the lighthouse is simultaneously this huge phallic symbol, but also Wake toasts the lighthouse at the beginning, right? He says, "To ye, me beauty." Like, he thinks of the lighthouse like his partner, and he's so protective and possessive in the way that you would expect a man to be of an actual intimate partner. So I don't know how to reconcile that, I guess, is the quickest way to say it, because when you hear the language that Wake uses to describe women, like the way that he puts down Winslow, it's always using feminine terms like being pretty as a picture, or describing a painted lady. To be like an actress is an insult, or a bitch. He uses all of these negative terms to describe what a man can't do, as if that's a weakness and therefore inherently womanly. So I don't know. I really don't know, because they are trapped inside this. I mean, it's not a chick flick, it's a dick flick, right? Like, they are trapped inside this giant phallic, well, it's the bottom part of it, but it's essentially being inside the phallic structure. And so I feel like it just speaks to this deep insecurity, basically. Like, this is the only place where they can feel like they're totally in power, and they're not trapped by a traditional relationship with a wife, I guess. And
yeah,
those
but they
kinds of
really
duties.
But what Winslow wants the entire time are the keys to the lantern room. That's all he wants the whole time. And what is he, like, against himself trying to fantasize about? He's trying to pull in female images, and then he keeps getting interrupted.
Yeah.
But all he wants is to go up there, and then all it seems like Wake wants is to bask in that powerlessness. You know, when he's towards the beginning, when it's almost like he's drunk with just the intoxication of it, and it's obviously not, so it's not annihilating him, and it's not doing any harm to him like it does to Winslow, which is another interesting thing. But it seems like they both do want some sort of oblivion, and that is represented not by masculinity. The way to oblivion is not masculine.
Well, I think they both want power, they want authority, but then they realize it's exhausting. Like, if you think about the fact that Winslow, he wants to have power over Wake toward the end, dragging him on that leash like a dog, but that's exhausting. Like, actually having to deal with that and dealing with them fighting each other all the time drains them of their energy. So I think the Lighthouse is about the conflict, it's about the push and pull of men wanting to feel powerful, but then realizing that it could destroy them, right? So I don't know if that's like the most psychoanalytic lens to put on it, but I think it's about men realizing that being a man and whatever they think living up to manhood is tiring.
I think it's also that it's unachievable. Like, there's a level of like that. I mean, you and I kind of talked about this in our Barbie discussion, where there's also this for women, where there is an inherently unachievable standard metric, whatever what you will, word for that, where we can't reach this thing. And so it's extremely frustrating. It's exhausting, like you said. It's tiring. It takes everything out of you. What are you doing it for anyway? You're like alone on an island and you're still struggling. I think there's also something to be said about, and this is where I get annoyed about all the reviews and the write-ups and everything, but I mean, it is there, about the guilty conscience, about wrestling against yourself, about trying to get past something that you did, the shame of that, wanting to be forgiven by some kind of father figure and not being able to get it. So you kill him. That's all the psychoanalysis stuff could just go on for days, because there's just so much that Eggers is throwing at this thing that reminds you of something else.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think about the fact that Winslow is an unreliable narrator? Because we see these clips from, these flashbacks to when he apparently killed someone. And we know that, he struggles with being able to articulate that and say that to Wake. And then when he does, it's this horrible, terrible thing. Why would you spill your beans like that? So, how much can you trust what he says, and how much of what he does is based on that guilt? Can you trust anything that Wake says? I mean, the story is also about gaslighting, right? Because it's about Wake telling Winslow one thing that we think we've seen not be true. So how do you really know who's the right one? Like, maybe we're wrong about who we think is actually right. So, do you think that that's effective? Do you think that that's just frustrating?
Well, okay. What it reminds me of is uh, Eggers was saying in an interview that when he met with Pattinson was like demanding for more backstory. He was like, I need to know this character so that I can play it. And he would give him suggestions like maybe it was this. And then Eggers was like, okay, all of that's good, but you need to decide for yourself or you won't know how to play the scene. To me, that perspective from the writer and the director of the movie saying, yeah, whatever you want the backstory to be, just make sure that you know what it is, means it does not matter. Like the unreliable narrator conversation to me is like, who cares? He doesn't even care what happened to this guy. So I don't think the point is what happened.
Right. Well, I also think about that in terms of reviews that have complained about the way the Pattinson's accent doesn't seem fully right, like it's shifting.
It does shift.
And I don't know if that's actually him as an actor failing to live up to the standard we were supposed to be setting for him for whatever accent we think he's supposed to have. Or it could be that you don't really know what the character is doing. Maybe his accent shifts around because he's shifty, because we don't know where he's from. We don't know what he's doing. Is he trying to hide his accent as part of this game of taking on a new identity because he's in hiding? We don't really know. And I like the idea that we can invent for ourselves whatever we think the truth actually is. So yeah, it doesn't really have to be what the author created. It could be our own imaginations doing the work, which I think is fine.
Well, and I just think that obviously that's not where the point is. Like the point of the film or what we're supposed to be wrestling with, or maybe what is out there to wrestle with that's valuable, it has nothing to do with what happened to this guy. Like a movie like Inception, okay? Inception relies so heavily on understanding exactly what happened to Cobb. It is to death. They explain Maul did this. It was at this time period. That is so central to who is this person. With this, I think the way that we get to know him is how he responds to his own confessions, like how he responds to his own emotional state and what he's fighting against. That's how we know him, not in what he says or what he did.
Right. And I think it's also in the way that they feel like they can't be honest with themselves, even though they're in this isolated area. Like, there is no other outside society telling them what to do or how to behave in the lighthouse. Think about the fact that when they are slow dancing, which is an incredible sequence, because I love the hard cuts from yelling and dancing and drinking to suddenly slow dancing. And it's so tender.
It is.
That is a moment where if they were so drawn to each other and they're so lonely and they wanted to kiss, they could. But they don't. They stop themselves. And who's stopping them but their own selves? Like, there's no society there to tell them, no, that's wrong. They just feel like, nope, I can't go there because I have this ingrained sense of masculinity, which means this and not that. And society's standards are imposing the weight, even though we're not in the rest of civilization. Like, we're on this island unto themselves.
Okay, so Jetta, I have to compare this. I think you'll agree that this is a lot like Swept Away, because Swept Away, there's a class difference there. There's no one around, but they resort to violence. The male especially resorts to violence a lot of that film because he's trying to fight what you're describing. Because right after they're about to kiss, Pattinson pushes him and then they get into a physical altercation, right? But Swept Away is the same thing where it's like, there's no one here. What is this? What is stopping you from acting on your desire and what you really feel? But there is something stopping. And so that makes them stop themselves. So that is a fascinating idea.
Yeah, it also makes me wonder if, could these men only really ever express themselves intimately with fantasies or inanimate objects in the way that Wake can only really be himself and vulnerable with the light? And Pattinson, Winslow can only fantasize and be this sexual being with this Little Mermaid figurine and in his fantasies. So even if they had a human being in front of them who they could actually voice these feelings to, they're not going to let themselves do that because vulnerability takes so much out of them. It's part of that exhaustion, right? To actually be vulnerable and talk about themselves in a sensitive, tender way is like a bridge too far. So yeah, like this is very much about men trying to protect that toughness and whatever they think they need to have in order to do the job. So
even though they're drawn to the mermaid, there's the female representation of the mermaid, there's the female representation of the light, and then there's also alcohol, which is the thing that makes them vulnerable without being so guarded. And that's what they're drawn to. Again, it's such a push pull relationship in this movie, because he's drinking the whole time because I think he wants to be there is this desire for intimacy. If there wasn't, they wouldn't drink at all. And they wouldn't even be tempted to. It's not just about like what he talks about, the boredom and the doldrums, where he said that's the evil is the boredom. I think it's because they actually want to shed that exterior, and there's no other way but to do these things, these certain things.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how these men would think that the worst thing in the world is boredom? Because they're not used to having to do women's work. They're not used to having to like care about food. They're not used to having to sweep and do all these things. So yeah, I mean, I just think there's something.
What do you think about that idea of like that you can't be vulnerable without some kind of assistance? That like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? The external light or the external drink or the external figure, literally there is an incompetence or like a maybe impotence, I don't know, there where they can't supply for themselves what they need.
I think they simultaneously love that the alcohol can release them of their inhibitions, and that's why they're even able to get to the point of dancing and the soft singing and closeness. So it gives them that access point to get to that place, but then they can also blame the drink on why they're acting this way and use it as a crutch to say, well, I was drunk, so I really didn't want that to happen. I didn't intend to get that close to you. So it's the constant conflict and contradiction of how that's able to provide them that both solace and also kind of amplify the fears. Like, what if when I'm drunk, I want to kiss you? Oh no. So yeah, it's also an excuse for them. So it's very convenient in that way. And also I love the fact that because the bottles of alcohol are what Wake had hidden as rations, quote unquote, that's his idea of rations. That's the idea of like something simple that he doesn't have to cook. Although also contradictory, the fact that he's so obsessed with the lobster.
Yes.
That is so funny to me. That's another part of the domestic duties. His greatest fear, irritation, embarrassment, it's almost like a shame. Like he can't believe that his lobster wasn't good enough. It's like he's being judged. He's judging himself. He wants Winslow to love what he did so much. And he unleashes this unbelievable curse, this curse of the gods
Titans,
on him.
The Titans and what is he called? Like Neptune?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And it's all because of a dinner that wasn't like the most amazing dinner anyone ever made. So it's all rooted in this tremendous insecurity too. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like digging into the psyche of these men. And also like going back to that line about why'd you spill your beans? They also don't want to hear anyone else's problems. It's not just their own, and the difficulty of having to express their own feelings. When Winslow confesses to Wake, that's like Wake saying, I can't handle what you told me. Why would you do this? Why would you open up to me?
Yeah, and he even says something like there's nothing more tiring and boring than a guilty conscience. And then there's another line where he says, like, I've heard this story before. And he's like, well, you asked. He's like, this is the same boring story. And that kind of gets to what you said at the very beginning about repetition and cycles. Like it is the same boring story. Like these guys are like the guys in Primer. Like they're just trapped in this time loop that is just never going to end. And it always has the same, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. But I wonder if Eggers is necessarily like interested in that more so than he is the actual production, because it was hard for me to find anything about him talking about anything we're saying. Everything for him is about like the time period, the costumes, what did things sound like, having the most accurate lenses, do you know what I mean? So that's interesting to me too, that someone would write something that's so Bergman, like a chamber piece, and then only talk about like how it was made and be really, really, really articulate and accurate about the time. Like the time period of this movie.
Yeah. Well, I noted, and I've seen this before, at the very end credits, Eggers emphasizes his inspiration from the writings of Sarah Orne Jewett, who also
That's right.
was writing in New England in the late 19th century. So very interesting that this story about men is so inspired by the language of a woman writer from that period, which makes me wonder, since I've never read her work, to what extent she ever writes these same kinds of stories that dig into the psyche of her characters, especially men. That'd be interesting to find out. Or if it's literally just the language, like the dialect.
I think it's the dialect.
Copied. So
yeah,
very interesting. But I don't know, maybe he thinks that he doesn't want to reveal his secrets. Maybe he doesn't want to give us too much, give too much away. He wants us to just, think about our own interpretations, and he's going to leave it just where it is. It's all on the table. You take whatever you want from it. Maybe that's his tactic as a filmmaker.
Yeah. Well, and I think he's also a person, obviously, with The Witch, you can see this, especially where he's obsessed with language, and he's also obsessed with like folk, fairy tales, occults, I think he's very interested in horror and all of that. And so it's almost like these elements make what we're trying to get at less, I don't know, it's like solid. Like you can't really put a rein around it like you can, costumes or lighting or what have you. Like it's not as, it's so malleable. So maybe that's why it's easier to say, well, this is just open to interpretation because you're not pinning it down for us.
Yeah, I mean, he could be drawing from the great literary tendency of doubling. He could be, because when I think about reading Crime and Punishment, thinking about the doubling of the criminal versus the policeman, how do they mirror each other? Are they two sides of the same coin because of what they both desire? If you think about Strangers on a Train, about the two men who both want to kill for a particular reason, but does one want it more than the other? How much are they really mirrors of each other? Do they really have the same exact needs and wants? Yeah, he could be inspired by all that, or maybe he's pulling all of this from somewhere else totally different. I also think about the fact that Louise Ford, who edited the film, actually did not go to film school. I don't know if you've read at all about her, but she actually was a journalist for 10 years. And apparently she just decided to change tactics and go into making film, and she just happened to know people who knew Robert Eggers. So that's how she got to start working with him. And so I wonder about that when I think about the craft of the film, because I wonder, how is she putting her own understanding of storytelling into what's put together? And how much does her ideas about like what constitutes an interesting narrative also influence what goes into the finished product? So it's not really just Eggers, it's also the craft of actually editing too. So I don't know. I don't know who's more in charge of that ultimate voice that we get from the film.
Right. Well, and of course the cinematographer also was excellent. That's what the only Oscar was nominated for, was that, which is gorgeous and unique. The sound design obviously contributes. Some of the influences I read that he cited was like obviously Moby Dick, Melville, Lovecraft. He loves The Servant, the Pinter-Losey film.
Sure.
That is very clear in this, I think, especially the claustrophobic nature, having everything be. The Servant is also gorgeous.
The power dynamic, too.
And the power dynamic is there. So that's like servant boss, but still, he is kind of portrayed in that way where he is like, I'm not a slave to you. I think he even says that. Winslow says, I'm not your slave. Right, I didn't come here to be, like a wife.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
And that's what's so funny about it, because like it has the look and feel of this period piece, serious, intense drama. It has the trappings of horror, but then it has all this comical just absurdity. I mean, like, these men are just constantly farting and vomiting and getting drunk and going out of their minds. And so it is just this very, very gross story, which is what I also wanted to circle back to, because I think at the very beginning I said that there were two things I wanted to mention, and then I only said one. So I got back there.
I derailed you because I was shocked at Survivor.
I derailed myself too. So I wanted to point out that this is a movie written and directed by men. It's, by the Eggers brothers, and it's really just about these two male characters. But there is this interesting tendency I've noticed over time with movies that are supposedly for women, specifically for women. They're made by women. There's a presumption that these are supposed to be consumed only by women, or that women are the only ones who can have opinions. Like, I'm thinking in particular about the adaptation of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, also Barbie, also The Bride. There is this tendency I've noticed on Letterboxd for men to preface their opinions with the disclaimer of, I might not know what I'm talking about. This wasn't made for me. I'm not the target audience. Take what I say with many grains of salt. But as women, we're not supposed to view stories about men with that same lens, right? There's an assumption that we can understand better what they're going through because we didn't have to walk in their shoes to understand them. Whereas when men watch movies about women, it's like, uh-oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what this is like. So, being a woman watching The Lighthouse, I don't feel like I'm removed from it. I don't feel like this is some unbelievably foreign concept. Women pass gas. So, it's not this unbelievable thing, right? We can understand what it's like to be insecure. We can understand what it's like to be afraid, to feel like you're at your wit's end in some extreme scenario. It's not implausible. So I do think there's something interesting about the fact that we're psychoanalyzing this movie about men, but it doesn't always work the same way when men are looking at movies about women. It's like there's a block where they think they can't do it. So I love the fact that we can watch a movie like The Lighthouse and think about what's driving them. Is this something I can apply to my real life with people I know? Do I know people like this? And I think we all do. I think we all know people who've acted like something like one of these men at some point. So, or even ourselves. So it's so interesting, right? I don't think it's a movie just about men. I think it's the human condition too. So
I wonder if the reason that men feel like they have to make some kind of caveat before they do it is because they are trying to be ultra sensitive. I think
bending over backwards. Yeah.
Right. I don't want to offend anybody. And so I'm going to preface this by saying, whereas if a woman is commenting on a hyper masculine movie, a lot of movies are that way anyway. So we don't really have to preface by saying that because most movies are not about women. Most movies are not if it was Once in a Blue Moon where there was a male director about a male movie, then we would probably say that. Right. But we're in just completely different situations culturally as far as cinema history goes.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about what the default is for how we're supposed to approach film. I've always thought one of the most incredible things about Point Break, and you know how much I love Point Break.
Yes, you do.
But when people talk about that movie, they say it's great because you can't tell that it was directed by a woman. You can't tell that Catherine Bigelow made it. I would actually argue that's not true because I think the way that the men are photographed and framed and the way that relationship is depicted is also shaped by the fact that Catherine Bigelow is more sensitive to how that's depicted, so it doesn't feel as crass, as dude-centric as it could have felt. I really think that her being in charge does mold it in a certain way. But I think it's incredible that we don't think about that with movies made by men. We don't think, oh, was this made by a man or not? We don't have to second guess it. And I think that The Lighthouse doesn't have to be just a dude movie. It's not just dudes rock. It's just a human story about failure, quite honestly.
Yeah, but I wonder if part of it is alienated, Jetta, because in rewatching the movie again today, okay, and I told you earlier, I saw it on my birthday in 2019 when it came out, and then I never wanted to watch it again. So today was the second rewatch from, 7 years later. I'm not a big fan of this movie as much as I really admire it from a distance. It is a little bit hard for me to feel kindred to because it is showing archetypes and genders very specifically in a way that is somewhat alienating if you don't relate. I mean, I know I agree with what you're saying about the human condition and that we can relate to it on that end, but I do think it does have a specificity to it that I can't deny. That I could imagine that a lot of women would be like, I do not want to watch this movie.
I get that too. Yeah. I mean, it's true that, you can also appreciate a movie from the perspective of I really love these actors, and so I want to follow
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing.
Sure.
And that's going to make me more interested in what they're doing than if they were two other actors. Like, I can't deny that I love that Willem Dafoe is playing Wake. Like, I
Yes.
love what he specifically brings to the character, which is also my into mentioning the greatest photo of all time. You know it, and I know it. The photo of Willem Dafoe at the supermarket in Nova Scotia when he was making the lighthouse. I hope that we can please drop in this photo. It is the
Oh my
greatest
gosh.
photo of all time when he's staring so lovingly at those pancakes. Box of pancake mix. I wish that a man could look at everyone the way that he looks at those pancakes. So I love that Willem's doing that. And I love Robert Pattinson in this too. I love that he challenged himself with this role because I think in 2019 he was still even, you know, years after, I don't remember how many years it was after the last Twilight movie had ended, but he was still trying to prove himself, right? Like he was still trying to prove that he could do more than that franchise. And I think it's an incredible performance. I think it's an amazing showcase for what he's capable of. And so incredible to think that he still has so much more time and room to grow as an actor too. So yeah,
What
I
is
do
it?
think it is specific to
think-
men for sure. But it's not impossible for me to find my way into it, I think. And that might also be because of the genre, you know, details,
That's what I was gonna
the
say.
horror aspect.
Or is it that you love performance? Because I know that you're a big fan of over the top performances, like when they're done very well. I know that. So I wonder if there were just certain ways in for you for this that made the other aspects that I'm talking about a little bit more palatable because you were like, okay, there's these aspects to it that I love so much. I think about like you with Tommy. Thomas,
Sure.
the Ken Russell movie, that there's certain ins for you, like Anne Margaret is an in for you, Oliver Reed is an in.
Sure.
That I wonder if because you are very singular in this way where I don't know that there is a female that would love The Lighthouse as much as you do. So there is a uniqueness to this that I am interested in.
Sure. Well, I think about it in terms of if I were watching an action movie, if I were watching a movie with an incredibly over the top villain, I just
Turbulence.
love. Yes, sure. I love when actors give me more material to work with. I would always rather that someone give me more instead of less. And that's not to say that I don't love minimalism too. You know, I love Ozu, but I do love when an actor gives me just so much to chew on. It's like you can't escape it. It's just all encompassing. I love that. And I've loved that in action movies. And of course, action movies are also presumably not made for women, but I love them and I love the adrenaline. I think The Lighthouse is full of adrenaline. It's full of tension. Those are things I really enjoy in movies. So whatever I'm watching, I find a way to get my direction into it. And when I watch an action movie and I think about the fact that it's presumably for a male audience, I think to myself, well, but if I find this actor attractive, if I think he's a really good actor, if I think he brings an intelligence, a sensitivity, or maybe it is just the muscles, whatever it is, there can be a way for me to get into that movie. And it doesn't have to be because it's made with a feminine perspective in mind. It can just be because I'm entertained. It's giving me something to think about. Even if I want to complain afterward about what I wish could have been different, it still gives me something to mull over. So yeah, I mean, it could be the genre, it could be the performance, but I just want to be entertained, I think, at the end of the day, and to have something to think about. And The Lighthouse gives you so much to think about, right? In so many ways.
What is it about it that really? Do you feel like there's anything when you're watching it that resonates on a psychological level for you, like on a personal level, or on like beyond just like that it's showing you a good time? What are there truths there, or is there something? Because I had a couple of these things where there were certain lines where I wrote down and I was like, oh, that really spoke to me, and it was kind of surprising that it was able to do that in the midst of all these other things that we're talking about, in the midst of the language of the movie, the weather in the movie, the way that it's shot, the sound effects, that there's these kernels of truth or kernels of deep observation I found kind of startling.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's about this intense craving for connection. And I think personally, it speaks to me in terms of how do you find that? How do you struggle with it? Just because you're in proximity to someone doesn't mean that you know how to connect with them. It doesn't mean you know how to communicate. People have to work on communication. And for as much as the Lighthouse is about language and it's about the beauty of that intricate language, it's also about how are these men actually connecting? Do they understand each other at all? Do they totally misinterpret what each is feeling about the other? Are they telling the truth to each other? Is everything a lie? Is everything a performance because they want to act the strong, tough man, the man in charge? So, yeah, I think about all of these things. It makes me think about workplaces. It makes me think about how I interact with people. It makes me think about deep-seated fears and wanting to prove myself. I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, wanting to prove that you're capable, wanting to prove that you're good enough to do something. I think when Winslow first comes to the lighthouse, he doesn't know what to expect. He thinks it'll be one thing. It turns out to be something else. It's harder than he expected. He feels overwhelmed. And I think that that's a totally relatable feeling. So even though it is specific to these men and how they either react or overreact to their situation, I think that is a very, very, like, it can strike a very personal chord within me because it makes me think about how I deal with the world and how I deal with my own things in my own way. Some things that I keep inside because I don't know how to express them and I work on it. So, yeah, I think it does feel very personal.
I think so too, especially at the end when he's calling what you just said about, like, are they lying to each other? Are they telling the truth? Like when he calls him a liar, you get the feeling at the end when he's screaming at him and Wake is on the floor that he's really angry at himself. Like he's calling himself a liar. All the things it seems like are just reflections of self-loathing. Like he hates himself and he's so ashamed and he just wishes that he could kill that part of himself. But that you know, almost like that voice that he wants to bury alive, but it doesn't go away just because you try to kill it, right? It's still, I mean, he plunges at him and then he has to murder him with the axe, but who knows if he's really going to haunt him, you know? I mean, he might haunt him. Well, like Wake could be in the seagull that is at him at the end because he says that they're the carriers of the dead mariners or whatever. So, yeah, I mean.
And also think about the fact that Wake told him not to kill the gull, that it would be bad luck, but Winslow had to do it anyway. He is told one thing, but he just does what he wants because he doesn't want to be afraid. He doesn't want to hew to superstition. He thinks that he's above it. But then in the end, we're given this mythical image, right? That's that Promethean imagery of him being pecked apart. So I don't know. Like, is this a story of you reap what you sow? Like, I guess that's what it's supposed to be.
Or like curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
I did have in one of my notes I wrote like insanity or enlightenment ? Like, do you think that is it like more like, you know, The Shining, Shutter Island, these movies where people go insane and they're kind of left to that end, or do you think there is any enlightenment whatsoever? Enlightenment in the film?
It's hard to say because they don't learn to work with each other. They can't live with each other. They ultimately tear each other apart. So it could be an incredibly bleak vision of humanity. But also, when Eggers ends the film with that very upbeat sounding sea shanty, it also makes the whole thing feel like this big joke. Like, it feels kind of like the ending of The Evil Dead, where it ends with this real upbeat, fun song. Like, it's all horror, but then it ends with this comedy. This note of like, well, it was just a story. It was fun. Like, I think that's so interesting. I mean, like, how seriously are we supposed to take this incredible strife and conflict that they went through? Was it all just for a laugh? I don't know.
Well, and I looked up the last thing he says is like it's a sailor farewell. So it's actually a poem, and that is the last part of it where he says God, something about God, and then about a suppliant soul. Like basically, if I plead for forgiveness and I am penitent, can I be saved? Which is an odd thing for him to say because he doesn't seem sorry at all. And even when he's just laying there getting pecked at, you know, the liver thing with Prometheus, it's like, is there any moral judgment in the film whatsoever? I don't know, because I don't get the sense that there's any sort of message here of like, don't do this or this will happen necessarily. It doesn't feel that linear to me. And I don't know that he's sorry about anything other than the fact that he's dealing with all this stuff.
I mean, Winslow does tell Wake that he's a God-fearing man, right? Like, if you're
Mm-hmm.
asking, I am God-fearing, but it doesn't ever seem like that actually factors into how he tackles anything.
Behaves.
Yeah.
All right.
And when he kills the gull and that changes the wind, like, is that actually a cosmic force compelling the winds to change, or is it totally coincidence? I mean, we actually don't know, which is the incredible thing about it, right? Like, we could say that there is this force that's driving everything that happens, or maybe it's all happenstance. Who knows? So that's also fascinating, right? We don't actually know to what extent any of this is being brought upon Winslow because of what he's done. Like, is this actually a god reacting to his actions and punishing him, or is he just imagining things and punishing himself? We don't know.
See, there's such it's such a I mean, it's almost like mythological level, cosmic level of these kinds of questions. Like I just thought of a quote. Dave Hickey said that the meaning of a sign is our response to it. So that is very different than like divine providence, God's sovereignty, that there is a God orchestrating things. This is more like Wizard of Oz, smoke and mirrors, where if you think that there's a wizard at Oz who is benevolent, then there is, because you live in a certain way in response to that belief, right? So does it matter what is actually happening? Yes, it does. I think, but I don't know. In the context of this film, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, we can see symbolism in absolutely anything, right? You can point to something that happens and say, oh, that was meant to happen, or that thing
If
caused
I had
that.
done this.
Yeah, and you can see this cause and effect, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's not true. Was Winslow brought to this point specifically because of what happened in Canada? Would he always have come to this lighthouse? Was he always destined to come here somehow or other? We don't know. And so I think that's also part of the fascination. Like, is this supposed to be this mythical, epic story, or is it just two guys stuck on a rock and this is what happens?
See, this is kind of where I know that this was like based on an unfinished short story, sort of, by Edgar Allan Poe called The Lighthouse, literally. And there's a lot of Shining stuff to me, comparisons. But what I like about The Shining that I don't feel is present here, tell me if you think otherwise, is the Overlook Hotel is possessed and it has kind of an agenda, right? Like, it is kind of like addiction, where it's after the person's soul. It wants to inhabit and then control. There is an evil sort of like, I don't know, a loss of agency, shall we say, in the Overlook Hotel when you're in there, if you partake, right? With this, I don't know exactly if the location itself has any kind of I don't know, design or intention other than like what these characters are bringing to the island. Maybe it's what they bring with them that determines what happens.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything actually in the light itself. I think it's totally what they read into it.
Okay.
I think that when Wake is staring into the light, like at the very beginning, and we see him toasting it, I think he's just totally bringing what he wants into that experience. It's like he has a one-sided relationship with it, right? Like, it's not like the lighthouse is interacting with him. He's bringing this imagined love, this meaning that the light has, into what he sees. And similarly, I think that at the very end, when Winslow is screaming into it, it's not because the lighthouse made him do it. I think it's what the men brought upon themselves in their own minds into that experience and made them, just like lose their sanity, basically. Whatever sanity they would have had in the world outside of that lighthouse, being there strips it away because of their own brains, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it's not, see, I kind of love this topic. I feel like I could talk about it a long time, but you just made me think of like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where the cup of Christ, they have to go in there and they have to find the one that they think was Jesus's cup, right? And then if you drink of it and you are bad, an immoral bad person, like a Nazi, you're going to shrivel up and die. And that's because the cup in conjunction with your immorality is causing a reaction. And then when Indiana has it, he's fine. That is very different than what we're talking about, which is that the light in itself is completely sort of is nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a non-entity. Whereas the Cup of Christ in the Last Crusade is not a non-entity. It actually has a lot of symbolism and meaning and power. So I don't know which one I prefer, because what if you contemplate the other end? Like, what if the light actually does something? What would you say that could be? Even if you were going to kind of think about other people's perspectives on this movie in that way.
Well, what I'm thinking right now is if we took at face value that there actually are two men who leave the island at the beginning, how would we read into the fact that they're allowed to leave and they're seemingly totally physically and we assume mentally intact? Like, why would they be able to leave?
Maybe they didn't go to the lighthouse.
Well, they were tenders, right? I mean,
but I mean, maybe they didn't consume the light in the way that these guys, you know what I mean? They're right. Very clearly drawn almost in a lusty way where it's like they can't fight it.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is if they were tending the lighthouse, right, and they were working with the light and everything was fine, that means that the light itself is not inherently sinister. It's nothing that the light itself is doing to them. It's the men who choose to interpret it in a certain way, to see some power in it that doesn't actually exist. But I think it's super interesting that what Wake gets out of it, what Winslow sees in it, this awesome, overwhelming power, that's not true for anyone else who's just like, it's a job, I'm doing my job, and then I leave at the end of the 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So yeah, I think it's totally what you bring to the experience that makes it what it is. Those two men, if they actually left the island, if they were real, if that really happened, because again, who knows, they left. They did their job and then they just were able to go. And apparently it did not affect them. It didn't break them. So,
but Jetta, this is true of like, if we talk about like alcoholism, right? There are people who can take a drink and they're not affected. And there are people who literally cannot control themselves after they take the first one. What would you say that has anything to do with the alcohol? Or you literally say that is more like because that is what you're kind of phrasing in a way where I'm like, that's what somebody would say who has no problem with alcohol. They'd be like, well, I can put it down. Therefore, there's nothing inherently in this because it would work on me. But that's not true. We know that it isn't.
That's interesting.
So how could you say if the light affects people in different ways, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not to do with the light?
Maybe. Yeah.
I got a maybe out of Jetta. I'll take it.
Well, okay. Yeah. No, that's interesting though, because I mean, sure, there are people who can drink and it doesn't affect them. And so they can't
being one of them.
Well, yeah, I just don't do it at all. Right. It's not that I drink and it's fine. Well, it's just I don't do it. So I'm not a great comparison. But
no, but you're like the guys who walked away at the beginning. You're like the men who didn't. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
The two men who walked away, maybe they didn't engage, just like you're saying.
Okay, but is it possible? Is it possible though that they were looking into the light and they just didn't get anything from it? They didn't see anything?
Yes, that's possible too. That's what I'm saying. Like there are some people who don't get things out of certain things. And it doesn't mean the thing isn't powerful or isn't a temptation. It just means that some of us are like, what do you want to say? Not immune, but some of us just don't respond to certain stimuli.
Well, it is interesting to think about if the light is like a substance, if it's like a drug, what is it that makes Wake want to forget, right? He basically wants to forget everything when he's up there at the beginning of the movie, right? Like he wants to strip himself literally of all his clothing, of whatever his role is there as the man in power, and he wants to just give himself over to the light, right? So yeah, I mean, I guess it's like what you want to get from the experience. If you want to completely give yourself over, then yeah, I guess you could think of it that way. Sure. And who knows what those men who were leaving were even dealing with when they were there. Maybe they never spoke to each other. That's also possible. So maybe they weren't influenced by each other and pushed in the way that Wake and Winslow, constantly are goading each other. And I think that definitely feeds into it too.
Well, and I also wonder if the light, if you take this a step further and say, is there anybody that could have had a positive response to it? Is there anything edifying? Is there anything that, like, let's say you or I went to this lighthouse and we brought ourselves to it, right? It's almost like reminds me of Stalker. When you go to the room and you have one question that you can ask answered, and they're too afraid to ask because how the room responds to the person is how they really feel, and they're afraid that they don't even know what they really feel.
Sure.
So it's this question of like, could any, like the most pure person in the whole world go to the light and have a positive experience from it? Or is it in and of itself like the overlook where it is going to destroy you in one way or the other because you yourself are flawed?
Yeah, I mean, we usually think of light in terms of enlightenment. We think of like the light of truth. We think of shining a light on something dark and making it good again, or at least getting out from under the darkness. So yeah, maybe it's only going to illuminate something bad in someone who is bringing something bad to it. That's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as clear what Wake has in his past that would be as dark and negative as Winslow, but
which is why he's able to go back over and over.
Maybe
because Winslow goes blind the first time he sees it. He can't keep going. I mean, he can't keep going up there like Wake does. We see Wake go up there multiple times.
Sure.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, if it's a reflection of character or some sort of something. I mean, I don't want to black and white this, but you know what I mean in terms of. I'm just trying to figure out what's the nuance there.
Right.
Because I'm very fascinated by it.
And it's also so interesting that it is so tied to this eroticism, right? It's tied to this intense physical desire. So it's not just a yearning for happiness, for contentment, whatever that is that, you know, spending time with the light is. It's also deeply physical. I mean, right? Like it's bringing up this erotic desire too. I also think for another point that I didn't bring up before, that moment when Winslow is peeping on Wake in the bed, like that moment when he looks in through that peephole, that's such an intimate moment, right? That's the kind of moment that we usually see in movies about men.
Like Psycho.
Yeah, like that voyeurism is usually trained on women. So that is also interesting that Wake, in terms of like the dominance and submission, there is that moment where Winslow has the power. But he also has that moment where he's underneath Wake, oh my God, I'm forgetting which one's which. Wake being up in the light, and also seems like he's masturbating while, you know, being obsessed with the light. So there are all these moments when Winslow is observing these moments of sexuality, and it seems like he has the power then, but does he really have the power? Because we're watching Wake's desire being enacted. So yeah,
it's kind of like the piano teacher,
point, but
no, the piano teacher in that way,
yeah,
where her character is so controlling and wants the atmosphere to be such that she can actually feel something, but it is often by either controlling someone else's pleasure or witnessing it. It's not really to do with her own, which obviously is an intimacy thing, right? Because he's protecting himself by not being directly involved.
Right. And you also wonder, is Winslow actually getting some kind of pleasure out of witnessing these moments? Or is he just like an observer and he feels a distance and a remove from it? Like, can he actually say he's a part of it? Or like, to what extent is he curious? So that's also interesting. It's about men trying to get close, again, like with the slow dancing, to an intimacy, but just far enough away that they can back away and say, nope, I wasn't actually a part of it. I didn't mean for that to happen. I could say it's a dream. You know, there's always an convenient out.
Well, and there's also like a repression there, like you were saying. I mean, there's also like, it's not acceptable for me to feel these things. I also thought of an audition a lot. In terms of men being afraid of women, afraid of powerful things, like being drawn to them and being sort of, what does he call it? In the enchantment of the light, that whole thing of like, I think this is why there's deep things here that resonate, because this is a very popular movie on Letterboxd and it's very popular with men. And I don't think it's just because it's, you know, the fart jokes and the whatever. I really think there's a lot of deep things going on here that are saying things about fears and maybe there aren't words to put to these things. And so it's easier to see them acted out in this time period that's safer. You know, It's safer if it's in a lighthouse in black and white in, you know, a long time ago, where you don't necessarily have to be confronted like the manosphere thing that just came out, where you're looking at something
which
that's
I just
modern.
watched last night, I have to tell you.
Oh my gosh. I'm so scared.
Yeah.
I just saw Bob's review of it and I read an article in The Guardian.
It's exactly what you think it'll be. I mean, you're not going to get something shockingly new out of it. Just like, yeah, that's what it's like.
Yuck. Well, but I think that's a little bit less, because it's an artsy vessel, it's easier to contemplate uncomfortable things than it would be if you just outright said toxic masculinity or whatever, Oedipal complex, Tyler, or shout out to Tyler, or, shadow self. These things are easier when you can see them.
Yeah, for sure. And do you also think that speaking again to the eroticism, is there also something in the way that Winslow fixates on that man that apparently he killed? He's remembering this lost figure as if he were remembering maybe a lost lover, like that image of the man with his perfectly blonde hair. There is something so beautiful about the way he's photographed in that memory. And maybe that explains the hyper-masculinity of him constantly having to fantasize about the mermaid figurine. Like he needs to fixate on this version of a woman to make himself feel like he's in control again. Because we don't really know what his sexuality is. Why is he constantly obsessed with the mermaid? Maybe it's because he thinks that's what he's supposed to be. And certainly at that time, you would have to repress your sexual desires if you were not the traditional straight man. So that's also interesting to me. Maybe that's why he goes so over the top in those fantasies of what those sexual experiences could be like.
Well, and I also, you saying, I was struck by this too, the image of the person that he killed. I thought of, I'm watching Hannibal right now, the TV show, and I thought of how the serial killer is depicted in the film as kind of loving his victims and wanting to care for them. There's a weird, I don't understand it. Maybe it's only in movies, but I thought of Hannibal, and I thought of that relationship of you having killed someone is almost intimate, or very intimate.
It's a deeply personal thing, right? I mean, yeah.
So that was my thought when I saw it. I thought, this is it's a weird mixture of guilt, but also intense closeness, because this person is bound to you for life because you did that.
I mean, there are serial killers who keep trophies, right? They don't want to let go of that memory. They want to keep some aspect of what they did with them. So yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what Winslow's feelings are toward intimate encounters, toward relationships, toward whatever he wants to really do. I think that the mermaid could just be an extreme exaggeration of whatever he's really feeling, just projecting it onto this possibility because he's in this unusual place, this place where a mermaid could, theoretically exist.
Well, and what do you think about the, the hypnosis painting, the Goya, beam part? What did you think about that symbolism when Willem is there and he's staring into him and the light is actually, because that to me was very, I'm not entirely sure how to, unless I just take it at complete face value.
Yeah, I mean, literally he does resemble a lighthouse by doing that, but also it makes me feel this is a man's fear of being seen, right? To be seen by someone, to be seen by another man, to be perceived as weak. The way that Winslow's on his knees, right, with the light shining down into his face. I think that's about the fear of being seen as anything less than masculine, right? Because in that moment, Wake is naked, right? He's seen as this powerful, muscular figure. I think that's about deep fears about not being enough, about being a failure, about not being whatever he thinks Wake represents as the perfect wiki, right? Because Winslow is trying to be good enough. He's trying to live up to whatever that expectation is. So yeah, I think that's his mind going to this extreme place of, oh no, I'm seen. What do I do? What does this mean? To have a light shown on him is just, that's intense. So yeah, I think
that's a great observation. I didn't think of it that way, but I think you're right. It's almost like being naked in front of someone for the first time. That level of, I want this, but also I really want to run away from it. Being coexistent feelings, and how powerful that contradiction would feel in the moment.
Yeah, what does it mean to live up to an ideal? What if Wake is supposed to be the ideal of a man in this context? He's the best you could be at this job. He's the best physically looking, I guess, if we're supposed to think that his body is the perfection in the way that it's presented. What does it mean to have to live up to that standard? And what if you can't? What's going to happen? Is it going to kill Winslow? Is he going to die because he can't survive in this world? So, yeah, I don't know. It feels very... Yeah.
My friend JQ I wrote this line down in one of his reviews for this. He said, "What is underneath the imposing edifice of unachievable masculinity?"
Mm.
So the question is like, if you strip all this away, what is left? And I think that's kind of it's almost like Virginia Woolf in that way, Who's Afraid,
Mm.
where we're trying to get to something. In Virginia Woolf, it's cathartic, I think, and the ending is very good, because they sort of exorcise the demon and the lie, and then they're able to kind of, okay, maybe we can move on. For this, I don't know that there's any sort of catharsis other than self revelation. Maybe I don't know exactly
Mm.
what that is, or just self annihilation. But there's obviously momentum, like you were saying at the beginning, moving towards something, and it's personal. It's very personal, and it's a lot to do with identity and a lot to do with relationship.
Yeah. I mean, if we think of Winslow going on this journey to find forgiveness, right? Because he
A
killed this
redemption, yeah.
man.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like he's looking for some kind of catharsis, of forgiveness from his crimes, I guess his sins. And I do also think, in that portrayal of the painting, Wake looks like a god. I mean, right? Like he looks like,
Zeus.
again, yeah, like again, also thinking about, when he's seen as Neptune in that fantasy of him having like the Neptune, like the beard,
Yeah.
the hair, everything there. So he is
The
supposed
hair.
to be this godlike figure, right? That he could, I guess, give absolution. So, maybe Wake is supposed to be that kind of all powerful figure. And Winslow
Well,
is
and
craving
Winslow has the line I thought was very telling, even though this is kind of in a practical way that he said this, but he said, "I thought you said relief was coming."
Mm-hmm.
He means literal relief, but he also means I need relief.
Yeah,
like,
emotionally.
And that's kind of why he relapses with the drinking. At the beginning, he's like totally sober and he's like, it makes men stupid. I'm not going to do that. And then all of a sudden he caves into that and then he wants relief. It's not coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, "Ye well know your lot." It's kind of like you're just damned. Like
Right.
you're going to suffer for your sins is kind of what it seems like. And then he's just obsessed with this lighthouse because he can't go in or because he thinks that it's the key to salvation.
Mm. Do you also ever think, since of course I've watched this a bunch of times, and so I think about this every time I watch it, is it also possible that maybe when we're seeing the two figures leave the island at the beginning, I know they're literally played by other actors according to the credits, but do you ever get this feeling of maybe we're watching the same men leave the island? Like there's this reflection there, like it's actually the same characters. Like I sometimes think about that, like what if that's, think of it as like sliding doors, right? Like two different ways you could go. We could be seeing Winslow and Wake leaving the island whole and intact and nothing's wrong. That could be one way that they leave. Or this is the other door. Maybe this is the other way where they go to the island and everything falls apart. So it's like we have two possible solutions here. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I always think about that, like the mirror image of like maybe those are the same men meeting each other, passing each other. I don't know.
It's like Time Crimes. Have you seen that movie?
I know of it. I have to see it.
Time Crimes is perfect for what you're saying, and it's a total exploration of that. Like not exactly what if you ran into yourself, but sort of like. But then I also think like there's they walked off the island, they were stuck on the island. Then there's also like, what if it didn't even exist because in the final shot there is no lighthouse. And one review I read was like, there is no lighthouse. So there's also that like annoying thing where it's like it was all a dream that I don't like in movies. But
well, it also doesn't have to be entirely 100% a dream. It could also be that last shot is maybe that's not actually literally happening. Maybe that's a dream after death. Maybe that's
or like a metaphor, literally like a visual metaphor, but he's actually dead.
Yeah, or it could just be like a visual representation of what he's gone through, but it's not actually happening. So yeah, I mean, it could be any number of things. Maybe it is literally happening. Maybe if we assume that if the superstition is that Wake comes back as the Gull, maybe Wake is like an immortal figure. Maybe he's like a power that exists on the island evermore. I don't know. Like maybe this, yeah, like exactly. I mean, maybe this is Wake getting his revenge, right? it's Wake doing this to him. So.
Well, and it seems like Wake has been murdering all of his assistants anyway.
Right.
I mean,
right.
when you're looking at the logbook, you're like, well, Winslow's kind of doing everybody a favor by trying to bury this guy alive, because he just brings people to the island to drive them crazy, like Misery. And then we're going to like keep you here and make you go crazy until, you know what I mean? He's kind of a psychopath. He could be in that reading.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fun thing about the Lighthouse. There are any number of pathways you can take to decide what this story is telling you. And I think that's much more exciting than a more cut and dried story where it's like point A to point B. This is what happened. This is the conflict. This is the resolution. It's all very neatly packaged. I love that this goes off in so many different directions. And it's like a maze. You could take whatever route you want. And I don't even know if you end up in the same place. Maybe you won't get to the exact same ending. Maybe there are a bunch of different possibilities. So I think that is so endlessly fascinating.
I do too. And I'm very glad that we had this conversation, because it's really enriched my feeling about it, because there is all of this, it can be annoying when there's so much psychological sort of terminology thrown at movies, where you're like, okay, this is just another review that's saying the same exact thing as they're all saying, because it is there. But I really was hoping to unpack it in a way that felt personal to us. And I think we did that. So I feel I like it a little better, Jetta.
Okay. Well, also, because I don't want to forget this.
Yeah.
When we saw it in the theaters, one of the great benefits of doing that was that it was prefaced by The Fall by Jonathan Glazer. And similarly, that's a short where you bring what you want to the experience. You're imagining what's going on there, why it's happening, how this could be happening. That is the beauty of watching a story where not everything is laid out for you. You bring your own insights, your own fears, your own dreams into whatever you're watching. So I love when movies are able to do that, whether it's a short or it's something much, in greater detail and greater depth. I love that. I love when I can go on this weird little journey and I have to figure it out myself and I have to be the navigator.
As long as it's not under the skin, I can do it. That's my
another movie I love. But
I know, Jetta, and we watched it together. Okay, so before we go, this is the new thing I'm doing for the watch this list. These are going to be Jetta's 3 recommendations to sort of go alongside the Lighthouse. So what would those be? I do not know what they are, so I'm going to react completely organically to whatever craziness Jetta has up her sleeve.
Oh, I don't think they're so crazy. So I was thinking about single locations, about claustrophobia, when you have 2 characters, especially. So the very first thing I thought of the seafaring location. I thought of Woman in the Dunes.
Oh, fantastic.
Another black and white film set by the sea, being trapped in this location. Yes, absolutely. I love the sound design of the Lighthouse, too.
I love the sound design.
Yeah, and the feeling of, am I being told the truth? Do I really know what's going on out there? Am I ever going to be able to get out of here? Do I have to change my way of thinking to adapt to the situation? Maybe I'll be stuck here, so I better figure out a way to handle it.
Stockholm Syndrome, which we didn't even mention, but that is a huge part of Woman in the Dunes. Like, could you begin to actually like it?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. Okay. That's a great one.
It's incredible. Yeah. And also the eroticism. Like, there is this incredible intensity in Woman in the Dunes, and how those characters bond to each other probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to people outside of that situation. They would think that it's unbelievable, impossible. How could they care about each other? How could they even begin to feel something for each other? Is it just out of desperation? Yeah, I think that's an incredible movie. And so I love thinking about those 2 together. I also wanted to mention, thinking about being at sea, Lifeboat by Hitchcock.
Oh, great.
That's another one where people are stranded somewhere. In that case, it's on the sea, but they are trying to find survival and escape. They're also trying to figure out who's lying amongst them, because if you recall, you've seen Lifeboat, right?
I watched it for you.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Yeah, as the disaster, when we did our disaster episode a million years ago.
Oh, okay.
I did Lifeboat. We did Lifeboat.
Oh, interesting. So I do not remember that.
Jetta's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't there.
But, in that movie, there is one character on the boat who's a Nazi. So you're trying to figure out who's lying, who's telling the truth, who's hiding the fact that they're really dangerous. And so I think about that when I think of the Lighthouse, about like, what's in your past? What could still be present? Are you dangerous? Like, are you violent? Am I going to fear for my survival here? Being at sea, of course, is incredibly treacherous. And just like being a man against the elements. I think a lot about that. Yeah. So those two. And I also want to point out the fact that all the movies I chose were all edited by women, just like Louise Ford editing The Lighthouse. Lifeboat was edited by Dorothy Spencer. Women in the Dunes was edited by Fusako Shizui. And then third, I wanted to mention my favorite Bergman movie, The Silence, edited by Ulla Rouge.
Yes.
So I thought about women in this case instead of men being in this claustrophobic, overheated, incredibly like claustrophobic location. In that case, instead of language being so ornate and intricate, they struggle to even express themselves. They struggle to get any language out. I think that's super interesting. And it's also about sexual repression. It's about wanting to connect with each other in ways that they can't fully explain, that are rooted in trauma, rooted in shame and horror and
exotica.
Yeah, that too, of course. Yeah, like there are a lot of stories like that. And so I thought about The Silence. Yeah. I thought about how people want to be close, but even if they're physically close, they can't be emotionally close, and they struggle to be able to get to that point where they can actually be themselves. Because if they reveal themselves, if they're vulnerable, they put themselves in danger. To be seen is such a scary thing. What if they're rejected? What if they can't be loved? You know, things like that. What if they can't love? So yeah, I think all of those films are great pairings with this, and because they're all black and white too. But I also wanted an honorable mention in there. Okay. I thought it wouldn't be fair to be part of Women's History Month without a film directed by a woman too. So I wanted to point out there's a great short by Maya Deren, one of the great avant-garde surrealist experimental filmmakers of the 20th century. She made a film called At Land, which has all this great surrealist imagery. In part, she is on a beach crawling over rocks. It reminded me a lot of The Mermaid, this elemental feeling of being part of the sea and the rocks and the beach landscape. And
Carnival of Souls also comes to mind.
Oh, that's good too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I love that Maya Deren was totally in control of her films because she also edited them. She starred in them, directed them, edited them. It's all totally her own creation. So I thought it'd be super cool to mention that too, because that is also a story where you bring your own story into it. You imagine what she's doing. You imagine why she's there. What is she dreaming about? Why is this happening? And it's kind of a choose your own adventure in that sense. So I love that.
Well, I think that Eggers himself would be very proud of your picks. He had a Hitchcock quote in one of my interviews I read, which is, so that's apropos. And then when someone asked him about Bergman, he was like, Bergman is always on my mind. Always on my mind.
I could believe that. Yeah, for sure.
Which makes sense. Through a Glass Darkly is also very in here with the ship at the end with the brother and sister, we're at the base in the black and white. So those are great. And Woman in the Dunes is an all-timer no matter what. Everyone should see that movie, period. Sand. Yeah. Lots of sand.
Well, I love the surrealist imagery in any of these films when a filmmaker can let go of preconceived notions of reality and just let the imagination and creativity kind of flow out.
Yeah. Well, I had a wonderful time with you, Jetta. Thank you. This was a pleasure. I think you are my most visited guest.
Maybe.
I think you are. This is like the 8th or 9th time.
Oh my
because
God.
I went back and renamed all of my episodes starting from 1. This is episode 118, and I'm pretty sure that you've been on 8 of them.
Wow. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. And we hope that you revisit The Lighthouse with a new lens, perhaps a female lens, and remember all of the wonderful points that Jetta has made.
Including Survivor.
You just had to throw that in there.
Sorry.